He grew into a young man that had the greatest combination of strength and kindness that I've ever seen in an individual. How could this happen to a perfectly well-adjusted, normal human being? Keller had made 5 calls to different hospitals to try to save his life. The decision to take one's life in as many as half the cases is made within 1 hour. Suicide can be like a riptide. It can be incredibly powerful for a brief period of time, and if not properly prepared, it can drown you, but it doesn't have to be perpetual.
Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dear Family, the podcast. This is episode number 92. Thank you so much for listening. I am so grateful. I hope you're doing well, taking care of yourself, and that means especially your mental health. Today's episode is a great reminder to check in on even your strongest friends who seem like they have it all together. I am so beyond grateful to have had the opportunity to speak to Gayle and Michael Zibilich, who lost their son from suicide, a heartbreaking reminder that it can happen to our most dearest loved ones. I just want to let you know that this is a trigger warning. We are going to discuss suicide. At the end of the conversation, you will leave feeling hopeful because suicide does not have to happen. And there are ways to get help and things to look out for to prevent it. I know you are going to find this couple so endearing and loving. And speaking of love, thank you so much for following me on all the social media platforms at Right Now Rachel. That's right with the W. Subscribing to this podcast and writing great reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really means a lot. And hey, word of mouth is really the best. So thanks for sharing. I wish you all the best always. Take care of yourself. Michael Zibilich is a commercial real estate executive who resides with his wife Gayle Zibilich in Atlanta, Georgia. Michael and Gayle had their only child later in life, an astonishing blessing for them. Keller was a dream come true and as good a kid as you could imagine. A combination of strength and kindness, very mature, an athlete, an expert whitewater kayaker, highly intelligent, and well-loved by everyone. After being humiliated by a girlfriend's social media post, Keller had an uncharacteristic anxiety attack during his second semester freshman year while he was in college at LSU. Keller attempted to call 5 hospitals to get help with no luck. An hour after helping out a friend, and hours before going to a wedding with his parents, Keller died by suicide, completely shocking his beloved family and friends. Devastated by their inexplicable loss, Michael and Gayle have dedicated their time and resources to promoting suicide education and awareness to college students throughout America. With the help of family and friends, they partnered with the Sigma Chi Foundation to create a suicide prevention hotline in Keller's name and an in-depth suicide education and prevention curriculum called Strong Arms for all 17,000 active Sigma Chi's across the nation, ridding shame and stigma, especially among men who are in fraternities and sports and in the armed forces who may consider talking about feelings as weak, has been an important topic of discussion during Michael's speeches. Michael is also a speaker for Active Minds, the nation's premier nonprofit organization supporting mental health awareness and education with young adults. Losing a child is the hardest thing a parent can ever go through, pushing Michael and Gayle into a state of post-traumatic growth. where their world was rocked so profoundly, they can't help but make the world a better place so that others don't have to experience the same heartache. They found comfort and new friendships with the young adults who are the recipients of a scholarship they've created in honor of their son Keller's legacy. Michael and Gayle remind us all that we must consider ourselves as first responders in our own lives and in the lives of those we know and love, and that our mental health is so important. I am so thrilled to have Michael and his lovely wife, Gayle, join us today. A mutual friend of ours, Tracy Hargan, who was one of my Dear Family podcast guests, episode number 52, reached out to me and she said, "You need to get Michael on your podcast." She said that you are such a dynamic speaker and that your voice is captivating. And you and I, Michael, had the pleasure of already speaking before, and
Yes.
I immediately agreed. I'm so grateful that you are here today. And we have the bonus of having Gayle sitting next to you. So that's fantastic. I'm going to start off by asking you, Michael, to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up and where you're living now.
Yes, grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and attended Catholic grade school and high school. Went to the University of Southwestern Louisiana on a collegiate football scholarship. Joined the United States Marine Corps Reserve out of college, and went to graduate school at LSU. And then in the early 70s, entered the commercial real estate business down in New Orleans and Miami, and traveled around the country doing commercial real estate business. Had the great fortune of going to New Orleans in 1981 on a large real estate deal and having an opportunity to meet and hire my wife some 40 years ago, which was the best thing that ever happened, and got her to leave New Orleans. And we have been living in Atlanta for the last 30 years. I've been basically retired from my commercial real estate business at the time of Keller's passing. And we've both put all our efforts, energies into mental health awareness, mental health wellness, suicide prevention, and have worked with and for many organizations trying to do the same.
I'm also from New Orleans and lived there the majority of my life until I met Michael. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. We came to Atlanta and had our precious son Keller, which was also a bright light in our lives at the time, and enjoyed him for 19 years. And he's been my rock since Keller's been gone. And I feel like this is why we're here now, to try and stop this from happening to any other families and parents, brothers, sisters. It affects everyone when it happens.
Tell us a little bit about Keller.
That's probably the easiest thing in the world to talk about him. We've got the typical parental love, admiration, and fascination. Keller came to us late in life. We had tried to have children for years before. Everything physically was perfect. It was just not one of those things. But God bless us, almost 29 years ago, we had this wonderful child. And he was truly a dream come true, an absolutely delight. He grew into a young man that had the greatest combination of strength and kindness that I've ever seen in an individual. He was a very athletic, a tough competitor in soccer, was in the United States Marine Corps platoon leaders class at LSU. Yet at the same time, he always looked out for the underdog. Although extremely popular, he was always looking at anyone and everyone in school who needed a helping hand. And I'm not trying to make him Mother Teresa, but he always had his eye on the underprivileged and the underserved.
That is a rare combination. Tell us a little bit about what led you to this advocacy and why we are here today.
Prior to Keller's death, as a preface, Gayle and I both knew virtually nothing about suicide outside of the typical cultural introductions in movies, books, and plays. We actually viewed it as an outlier. We thought it only happened to a certain type of person who had significant mental illnesses and had those illnesses or illness for a long, long, long time. Shocked would not even be an appropriate word when we found out that Keller had passed by this means. We were confused beyond comprehension and immediately started to look into how could this happen to a perfectly well-adjusted, normal human being. And did a lot of research in that particular area. And Keller was a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity at LSU. In fact, he was president of his pledge class and the only freshman on the Interfraternity Council at LSU. And his fraternity approached me and asked me to speak at their national convention in Indiana, in which they brought almost 2,500 young men from almost every college in the United States to give a speech on suicide. They had never addressed it as a fraternal organization. And that speech, frankly, ushered in our interest formally into trying to make a difference. In conjunction with that, we decided to form a fund in Keller's memory, initially to engage a scholarship in his memory at LSU. Over time, that morphed into a partnership with the Sigma Chi Foundation, and in order to develop the first ever Greek life 1-800 number, Keller had made 5 calls to different hospitals to try to save his life. So we developed the Keller Zibilich Lifeline. We did that through charity golf tournaments, fundraisers, et cetera. We raised almost $400,000 in total. After the Lifeline, Sigma Chi and the Zibilich family got together and said, we've got to do more than just have a reach out application for somebody. This really needs to start and be more oriented to education. So we joined with Sigma Chi to start a program called Strong Arms, which is a course that all Sigma Chi inductees must go through, and it takes them through a mental health awareness and wellness situation. We got significantly involved in Sigma Chi in raising money, the development of Lifeline and Strong Arms. And then I started speaking for Sigma Chi across the country, and then was introduced to Active Minds. And 4 years ago, became a national speaker for them. I speak for, other organizations as well as needed be. Our advocacy started initially in fundraising through scholarship, moved to an association and partnership with Sigma Chi, and is now morphed into Active Minds and other organizations. And we've virtually devoted our full time to those particular issues, and will continue to do so as long as possible.
Can we go back to the day that Keller saw the photograph of his girlfriend and what led up to him having the anxiety attack?
We still study this, I think, about it day and night. But I think what happened was he had been troubled with this young lady for a while. And I believe it was his first real girlfriend. He met her in Atlanta. And I truly believe he thought in his mind, this is the girl I'm going to marry. And she started having time with other people. And he found out and was very upset the first time. And it continued. And I think it just drove him to a point where I don't know that he knew exactly what to do, but a lot of it was on social media at the end. This is right before he died. I think there was a whole lot of things that really, really hurt him on social media because he heard about the girl being with other people through some of his closest friends. And I don't think a lot of them confided in him like I think he wished they had. I know he lost a lot of sleep. He had exams going on at the time. I believe there was just a whole lot of pressure on him. We still don't really know what happened that day. It's going to always be something we'll never understand. But I truly believe that he just got to a point where either the pain was just too much, the embarrassment, the pain he was having with her wanting to someone else. And I don't know if he couldn't cope at that point where he just had to get out. I know he was trying to get help, but didn't know where to go. But we're still so confused about what happened that day. I think it was a lot of different things all together that got him to the place. He hadn't slept. That can really mess with the thought process behind anything you're doing, the embarrassment.
Up until that point, you had never had concerns about his mental health? I
spoke to him that morning at 11:15, the morning he passed. He was excited about the wedding. He said, "Mom, did you put my shirt in the car?" I was bringing him a new Ralph Lauren dress shirt with French cuffs. He said, "Mom, my suit's clean. My shoes are in the bag. I have a new purple bow tie." He talked to me about the food, what's going to be served. He was very excited about so many things. I had no idea that he was really suffering the way he was. He did explain, though, that he was having some anxiety. And we discussed that a little bit. And I didn't take it too seriously because he didn't. But he was a happy guy that day. He was excited.
Back to your original question, there was nothing in his background in high school or before that gave any indication. Nothing. And believe me, with an only child, we were not blinded by, other kids or other activity. We were not trying to gild the rose with him with regard to he's perfect. There was literally no sense of any problems at all with him. He visited us 12 days in Atlanta before his death. Both of us had never seen him happier in life. There was no heads up on this, nowhere to go. This compressed into an extremely short time period, which is my understanding that can happen a lot with regard to circumstance.
He started feeling some anxiety and his friends witnessed this. Can you tell us about that?
The day before, Keller that afternoon had literally been in charge of the interfraternity crawfish boil at LSU, which is an event that is into the thousands, pretty significant. And he was evidently perfect doing that job. But later that evening, in the accompaniment of his girlfriend, a girlfriend of hers, and someone else, he started acting erratically in relationship to how he normally felt. And behavior both in the car and back in his dormitory room, I guess, was so completely inconsistent with his normal personality that several people in the room said, this is bad enough to call 911. Others in the room said, no, this is Keller. This is an anomaly. He's always the strongest. He's going to settle down, in which he eventually did settle down. So I guess that reinforced the situation that he is, quote unquote, okay.
It happened twice.
Yeah.
There were chances to call 911. And if that had happened, I think he could be here right now.
It's an emergency. If somebody is acting so erratically and it's not their normal behavior, or if someone obviously is suicidal, that is an emergency. But Keller tried calling hospitals 5 times, and each one was unsuccessful. That must be so heartbreaking for you.
Heartbreaking is obviously true. The interesting thing, we were talking about these 2 times the day before in which he was highly anxious, highly stressed, wakes up the next morning. He's relatively speaking calm, speaks to Gayle, talks about his anxiety a little bit, but focuses more on seeing us that day. And he's, remember, waiting for a ride to join us the 30 miles away. He's asked to go down the hall to a couple of guys in the dormitory and spends time with them, helping them out with a problem. And the subsequent visits that we've had with this young man has indicated that Keller was the same Keller he knew for 8 months. He was there to help them. He was his normal, upbeat, complete self. One of these 2 young men was one of the first people in the room an hour later, and he could literally not believe that the same guy that left his room was now gone. Because Keller had gone back, got on his computer, wished a girl in Atlanta happy birthday. He graduated from high school. And then subsequent to that, he made the 5 calls over a period of time. It's
crazy.
A horse, a kingdom for my horse. He was in a state of significant, obviously, anxiety and distress. But at the same time, he was aware of it and realized, I need help. Usually you do not find those circumstances colliding in which you're going through this immense turmoil, yet at the same time, he's calm enough to say, someone please help me. And I guess every unsuccessful call, I'm presuming there's no basis in fact here, obviously, must have increased his anxiety that there's nowhere to go.
I have to presume that as well. This is so important for people to understand and hear, that it's sometimes the strongest people that are suffering silently. And what is so important that your message is, and what you've done with this lifeline, is if someone reaches out for help, it needs to be taken seriously immediately. Also, another very important message is that this happened in such a short period of time. As you started off by saying, your thoughts of what it meant to be suicidal was maybe somebody that belonged in a psychiatric ward, whereas Keller was helping someone literally an hour earlier, wishing someone a happy birthday. If something comes on this quickly, there needs to be a resource that's immediate. Tell us about this lifeline.
We basically funded a lifeline that hooked into a national 1-800 number. We didn't create a complete separate one. It funded this for the utilization of the Sigma Chi fraternity that eventually also morphed into a reach out application on their phone where they could get a dedicated text to someone and get a response immediately. I think, Rachel, what you spoke about just a moment ago and what we've been informed by our study of this, we always make sure that when we speak to anybody and everybody, we both make it very clear we're not psychologists, we're not suicide experts, we're not psychiatrists. The most stunning thing we both learned collectively on this is the decision to take one's life in as many as half the cases is made within 1 hour, which is a stunningly brief period of time to get help, making any type of reaching out, whether it's to a friend, to a roommate, to a relative, to whomever, or to a dedicated line. And those contacts, whether they're a physical contact in front of someone or on the phone with someone you know, or through a collective call to somebody in this particular field, it's just so important to be able to get the response because it can literally make the difference. The metaphor that comes the most easy to us is that suicide can be like a riptide. It can be incredibly powerful for a brief period of time. And if not properly prepared, it can drown you. But it doesn't have to be perpetual. And in these instances, people make very quick decisions in intense pain. I've had the privilege of speaking to a fair number of people who have had their suicides interrupted or stopped. It's been stunning to hear how their entire vision got channeled into a single focal point. And these are highly successful young people and incredibly accomplished adults, mothers, fathers. And it really illuminated this literally can happen to anyone. It's an equal opportunity destroyer. It has no creed, no color, no sex, no gender.
There's this saying about suicide, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I speak to students about warning signs for mental health. When I talk about suicide warning signs, that's not just a red flag. That's a glaring, blaring siren going off, and you call 911. You don't wait on it. It needs to be acted upon immediately. My mom has bipolar and called the suicide hotline during the pandemic. It saved her life. She ended up in a mental health hospital and she thankfully is doing well. Your message that really speaks to me is that somebody who on the outside looks picture perfect, like that child that you just think has everything going for him, tons of friends, involved in school, and something like this can happen so quickly. It is so important to listen to your intuition if you are that friend who's concerned about another friend acting out. Or if you yourself are having these momentary feelings of suicide ideation and you need help, you need to act upon getting help. I say this all the time, asking for help, it's not weak, it's incredibly brave. And the fact that Keller tried to ask for help 5 times was such a brave act. He knew he needed help. I'm so sorry that it wasn't there for him. And what you're doing is ensuring that that's not going to happen for another person.
Well, I think what you just articulated is entirely true. It's one of the 3 points I like to make in any speech. It is not a sign of weakness to ask for help or to talk about your problems. It's actually brave to be able to do so. That's a point that needs to be emphasized very significantly, particularly with males, obviously, who unfortunately are the majority of all suicides and the most difficult to reach because of the typical male attitudes about such things as weakness. When a guy says he has a problem, people look like, well, did you break your leg? Or did you got the flu? They don't consider an emotional problem a problem. That particular situation can lead to a disastrous result, and frankly accounts for that outrageous ratio 4-to-1 men to women.
You brought up your 3 points that you like to speak about. Can you tell us those life-saving conversations?
Your mental health is absolutely as important as your physical health. And that is something Gayle and I have learned more than anything else. It should be as obvious as a door on a house, but it is not. We take it for granted. And the irony of it is your mental health can affect your physical health as well. Yeah. We're always talking about physical well-being. If I could change one thing in life, there was no apparent signs of any type of mental or psychological difficulty. But notwithstanding that, it should be a topic of conversation that we emphasize, even in situations in which there isn't any obvious distress. It's just precautionary. You can be a world-class swimmer. I'm a whitewater fanatic. If you get in a kayak, you need to have a life jacket on. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you can swim the English Channel. You need a life jacket on when you get in a kayak. And number 2 is the point we talked about, is it is not a sign of weakness to ask for help or to talk about your problems. Frankly, it's a sign of courage. And we've got to emphasize that to where we can get people to talk. And then the third thing is, which is just as important as the other two, just like a physical ailment, a broken leg or the flu or a fever, your emotional problems can be treated like your physical problems. Yes. There are people that do that. So there is help. There is hope. There's an ability to get better with the problems you have. I think those 3 things, and they're clearly not original thoughts from Michael and Gayle Zibilich. I'm not remotely saying that. These are the 3 things that we really need to impart to as many people as possible, because if they understand that, the behaviors that can come out of those 3 recognition points can help save somebody's life or help keep you healthy.
It's so true. And as we know, the earlier intervention, the better, just like with a broken arm or any kind of physical ailment, same with mental health. I want to elaborate on the signs of weakness that men sometimes feel, because here you are, you played football and you were in the Marine Corps, and Keller was an athlete and very involved in his fraternity at Sigma Chi, and also involved in the Marine Corps.
He was in the collegiate platoon leader Marine class, where you go a couple of summers, and then when you graduate, you can become a United States Marine Corps officer. So serving his country.
Big into whitewater rafting. He was a kayaker and did quite a few pretty tough rivers. I mean, he was very athletic.
We need to bring mental health awareness into those masculine and manly arenas and understand, just as you said, it's courageous to talk about. I have 2 daughters. I don't have sons, but I do think that we need to raise our boys and bring them up to understand that being emotional or talking about emotions and being vulnerable is brave, is okay to talk about. I know you're going in and counseling young men. What do you tell them? How do we change that stigma?
It's basically the hardest thing I do. Maybe about a third of the speaking is to young men, and the rest of the speaking is to mixed collegiate or high school audiences. I really try to emphasize, as tough as you may feel physically, as many activities that you engage in that are a lot of them typical male activities, you've got to be extremely conscious that you're as vulnerable as any other human being to emotional ups and downs and mental stress. You're not immune to this. Just as you can get knocked down on a football field, you can get knocked for a loop emotionally by a relationship or a circumstance. There are many different things. It doesn't have to be romance, period. It can be a lot of different things, the stresses. I literally try to use that metaphor. Every play in football ends up with almost everybody on the ground. They got to get back up again.
And it's okay.
And they got to get back up again. You're not going to go through a game not getting hit or hurt. And that's life. And I think that's the emphasis and it's okay to take a hit. And if you talk about it to your roommate or your teammate or the person in class or your professor or your Uncle Charlie, you need to be encouraged to do that. But the only way we're going to do that is constantly reinforcing this. And it can't be, as I tell Sigma Chi hierarchy, both Gayle and I went to a big Sigma Chi Foundation and an event last week in Atlanta. We can't just have every 2 years the speaker comes in and says you need to take care of yourself. That's not going to work. It's got to be reinforced in the home. It's got to be reinforced everywhere. And it doesn't mean that we have to bring a crying towel to everybody. It's just, it's okay to talk about stuff. And you're going to have problems, and that's normal, just like you're going to have problems in any other aspect of life.
That's right. And also needs to start younger. You bring your kids in for physicals. Why not bring them in to talk about their mental health and get rid of the boys don't cry concept? We do a disservice to our young boys when we make them feel like if they cry or if they want to talk about hurt feelings, that's not manly. It needs to start in the home too.
Yes.
Rachel, thank you for saying that. It's very interesting. Last 2 weeks ago, I was asked to give a Zoom speech to a very high-end private high school in Maryland. We were out on the road at a wedding of one of our nephew. And I had never spoken to parents before, which was extremely ironic. Never. It was always speaking to predominantly 18 to 22-year-olds, some high school. I was more nervous about doing that, and not the speaking part, nervous about the message. I knew at the angle of the speech, Keller's story would stay the same, because that's why we're here. It's Keller's story. But I was trying to look for that angle. I did a considerable amount of thinking and more research. And the point that you made is exactly the conclusion that we reached together, because Gayle helped me, and which I emphasized in this talk to parents, is to encourage them to start talking at an early age. If you had a disappointment, you got the C instead of the B. The guy beat you out on the basketball team. Teacher doesn't like you for some reason, although we love you. That start at an early age and make it a process, just like you would for anything that they would do physically. Yeah. Buckle your seatbelt, put your life jacket on. Those things we would always think about. So what you said is exactly right on. It shouldn't be the speech when we put them in the car to take them to the University of California or to LSU. It needs to be early, even if you don't think that there's a reason for you to give the speech.
It's really true. A side note is that a lot of kids, when they start developing stomach aches, the gut-brain connection, parents need to realize if kids are starting to complain about stomach aches, it often can be anxiety. And so to be aware of that, there can be a connection there. Of course, get it checked out physically, but if there's nothing going on physically, be aware that can be some anxiety. Michael, you were part of a very powerful documentary called Wake Up. It came out before the pandemic and it went to the Tribeca Film Festival and it received tremendous reviews. And I had the privilege of watching it and I was so incredibly moved. It highlights 4 different stories. There's a suicide survivor, as well as family and friends who have been affected by suicide. And Keller's story is one of those very powerful stories. I have to be honest, I cried multiple times watching it, but it was so well done and it left you feeling hopeful. And it also was just visually beautiful. I can't recommend it enough. It was so well done. Can you tell us a little bit about this film?
Just as about 30 seconds worth of background, I had given this first speech at Sigma Chi at the National Convention, and one of the adult leadership gentlemen there subsequently talked to a young man who was in college at the time at the University of Missouri and told him about me. And this young man had lost 2 of his best friends in college. And that initial contact ended up in terms of our being involved with this entire process. And they came to us 2 years ago to do the filming. It was released literally right before the pandemic. We had openings in Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Atlanta. But when the pandemic hit, we had to go online. What's happening with the movie right now is several things. The producers, the directors, and the founders are trying to find the right home for it right now. We've learned a lot about this particular business in the last 18 months. They want its content and its distribution to be as broad as possible. So they have resisted the temptation to take it to a single entity because you can then lose control over what you're doing. The first thing that we did was actually enter into an arrangement and business deal with Active Minds, who I speak for, and which we have shown the film both in person and online across the country. And it's not an exclusive arrangement. Universities, colleges, high schools can contract with Active Minds through Wake Up and have an opportunity to look at the film and have us be in a position to talk about the film after, engage in Q&A, et cetera. It's my understanding, talking to the director and obviously the founder, Alex Lindley, that they're working very closely right now to get a much wider distribution. I think that's going to be coming soon.
I'm glad to hear that they're pushing it to go far and wide because it's such an important message. And I really do think that it will affect a lot of people that see it. And bravo for that, because it was very, very well done. Social media and technology are driving factors in the increased rates of suicide, especially among our youth. All the numbers have increased during the pandemic, and the feeling of isolation and feeling like kids are missing out, which we all know on social media. It just looks like everybody's having this perfect life, which is never true. And that has increased spikes in depression and anxiety, and those can go hand in hand. And that can lead to substance abuse, to self-medicate, and then that can lead to reckless behavior. There are some obviously good things about social media. Believe me, I love social media, but I see the downfall. You speak to college kids who are dealing with this immense pressure to achieve and to look good, especially with young women who there's that whole added layer, the whole Kardashian unfortunate effect. And the pervasiveness of technology into their space. Do you counsel them on any of this or give any feedback?
Yes. In fact, it's amazing how attuned this conversation between us is right now. There's a significant part of the speech that I talk about these exact issues: social media, the smartphone, the incessant necessity to respond constantly. You can't demonize this. You're not putting this cat back into the bag. This presumption that life is perfect, the need for perfection, all the way up and down the line. I think Gayle could speak to this. Part of Keller's exhaustion, I think, related to how many texts did he receive from his girlfriend?
Oh, it was absurd.
Into the hundreds?
Hundreds, thousands. He was being controlled through the phone. He used social media a few times to try and scare her, but it just didn't work. Social media was a huge part of his embarrassment, humiliation.
Your remarks just a moment ago, this pandemic has just added gasoline to an already hot fire. I don't think it's a gross exaggeration. Are living distracted artificial lives through screen sets and through typing, clicks, et cetera, not even actual phone calls, where you can at least, I can tell the tone of your voice, I can understand the pace, I can sense pauses, the things that are necessary for adequate and meaningful communication.
Right.
I feel for our kids. I really do. I'll see my daughter's phone lighting up with a million things on all the different platforms she's on. How do you even keep up? It becomes a little bit addictive, and it's unfortunate. We have to remind these young people that there's so much more than their likes, and how important to take a break and put it away or find some time where they're not looking at it. When my girls went to summer camp and were away from it for a few weeks, they realized how great it was. It's a problem. It's definitely an issue. And I'm glad that you're discussing that on your talks.
Because it can give an impression of a perfect life. I see what you present. It's only the good side. Life is infinitely more complicated, but we get these images of this element of perfection, and then that builds up in your own mind. I think it's as harmful for the people that are viewing it as it maybe is for the ones that are posting it. They're trying to pose some image that doesn't accurately reflect what's going on in their lives. I try to at least address it and talk about its role.
I can only imagine the worst thing as a parent is to lose a child. My best friend was killed when she was 16 by a drunk driver, and I will never forget the pain of seeing her mom. It stays with me to this day. I think about it all the time. And I'm so sorry for you. I really am. And I'm so glad that you have this advocacy, because I do realize the importance of helping others and giving back, how that helps, but it will never erase the pain that you are feeling. I also know that it must be so difficult for you to clearly your love for one another, talking about at the beginning about how it was the best thing that ever happened. How do you support each other through this difficult time? And do you have any advice for loved ones?
It's a very, very difficult question to answer. We both feel that neither one of us would be here without the strength and compassion of the other. We have grieved together and grieved apart. We try to have a balance. There's sometimes when one person is more up or more down, or sometimes together, that we're both experienced it. The statistics will show you, particularly for mothers and fathers, there is an enormous negative statistic when a child dies. There can be a lot of guilt. There can be finger pointing, and I'm not trying to be negative about this. The numbers are scary. The one thing that I think that we had is that he could not have had a better mother. He is not dead because of his mother, and I think Gayle believes that he is not dead because of his father. We loved him equally, and so there was none of this. You should have spent more time with him, or you were too tough on him, or you were this, or you let him. There was none of that, and I think that can really escalate in a relationship. Sometimes it can have some reason for that, but we've been fortunate that we have not, and we try to keep Keller alive.
I think what we're doing is what's kept us strong too. We have this to lean on. We lean on this pretty heavily, and it's almost 24 hours a day.
And it's wonderful, the nice things you've said about us, and I appreciate that. And I think we're doing some good things, but we're getting something out of it too. We really are. It's a price I wouldn't want anybody to pay. It's a price that's way too expensive, but we have met an incredible group of people in life.
Especially our younger scholarship winners, many of them. We've given out, 9 scholarships? There's probably 7 of them that we are sometimes weekly in touch with.
What a beautiful legacy. Tell us about the scholarship.
We give a scholarship every year in Keller's name. We raise the money, but it's through the Sigma Chi Foundation. And we usually have contestants from 5 or 6 universities in the Southern District: Ole Miss, Mississippi State, LSU, Tulane. And each one of the chapters puts their best young man forward. And then we whittle them down, have an interview process, an application process. We all thought in the front end it was going to be extremely easy. It was going to be an obvious secretariat racehorse that was going to run away. We found out that it was extremely difficult to make the choice. There's some incredibly wonderful young men that are doing so many good things in life, transcendent of the fraternity and their grades and their career, that are actively engaged in making a change in our life. But those scholarships that we've given each year, and as Gayle indicated, we're extremely close to these young men now, and they've become like sons. And then we've met so many people in this business. Right here, speaking to one right now, who has dedicated yourself to really, really, really making a difference. We already had a very broad life and a full life when Keller was with us and before he was with us, and that has continued. So we're getting something out of us. We're getting meaning, and not just meaning of doing good things. We're meeting people that are dedicated themselves to make a difference and have new friends and people from throughout the entire United States. We treat these young people as a gift from Keller to us. Yeah. When everyone leaves the house and the speaking events are gone, or when you walk off stage, those people are gifts to us. And we want to continue to do this as long as we're both physically relevant and can get the message apart. We want to try to do it. And believe me, Gayle is with me at all times, even though I'm on the stage, etc. I'm never going to say no. Never going to say no. If it's 5,000 people, or if it's 2, or if you ask me to call your Aunt Matilda, I will call your Aunt Matilda.
I had people call us to help others on a single case.
I do think that that's Keller's legacy. Michael, a young woman that went to high school with Keller, reached out to you. Keller was very kind to her on a day that she was having a hard day when her books got knocked out of her hand. And basically, in so many words, he saved her life because he cared. And he was one of those people to not ignore her and walk by her and help her. What a kind and yet strong person. You talked about how Keller's suicide led you to have something called post-traumatic growth. I love this term. Can you tell the listeners what is post-traumatic growth?
It's treating on a well-known concept in relationship to trauma. Our growth is that we've looked a lot deeper into people now, a whole lot deeper, and look beyond the facade and have realized, and something you mentioned earlier, Rachel, that there is always something going on, even in the most beautiful face, even in the strongest body, and to try to look at that more than rather what you see just in the regular day-to-day function. We've grown by being able to look into people and treat them hopefully more compassionately and understand that we're all struggling. It doesn't make a difference who it is. Every human being needs help. And the only way we're going to do it is one hand at a time, one hug at a time, one look at a time, one conversation at a time. That's the growth. I think we both wish, shoulda, coulda, woulda, have known more about this in advance to be able to impart something that might have made a difference.
I think we could have made a difference if we had known then what we know now.
That's the hard part of suicide. There's a lot of guilt and all of that, but you can't do that too.
So it's the most, and frankly, as we all know, it is the most complicated human activity is the taking of one's life. And it is so complicated. We all want the simple answer, if this or if that. We know it's much more complicated than that. But I do think that all of our efforts basically are relating to awareness. Just simple awareness that the water's deep and it's not shallow is definitely going to save lives. In the last 5 to 10 years, I've noticed, and Gayle's noticed it as well, people are a lot more open now in talking about this. Now, it may take years for the numbers to start moving in the direction like the seatbelts and the drunk driving. They may continue to go up for a while. But I think we're providing a foundational base right now. There's so many more people. If you go to, outside of COVID, obviously we're still in. The rallies we went to 6 or 7 years ago were much better attended 2 or 3 years ago than before. The more people you have engaged in it, the more people like you that are doing this out of the goodness of your heart and trying to make a difference and throwing these seeds to fertile ground here. It's got to be brick by brick, as they say, life by life, story by story.
I just want to point out for a listener that might be afraid to bring this topic up with a loved one, that by asking them if they're considering suicide or if they have a plan, they're not going to plant a seed in someone's mind that wasn't thinking about it. So don't worry about bringing that very scary topic up. It's incredibly important. I also wanted to let the listeners know all of the links will be in the show notes to Active Minds and to the suicide prevention hotline and some of your talks. I am going to ask you my last questions that I ask my guests. And I'm going to start with you, Michael. If you could write your younger 20-year-old self a Dear Michael love letter, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
That it is okay not to be okay. That it is okay not to be perfect. Life's bumps are there and will always be there. And they're there for the rich, the poor.
And you learn from them.
And that you learn from them. And that it is okay to be down. It is okay to realize things are not perfect. And what's important is that you discuss those feelings with people and you're open about it. Because the more people you can get in the boat rowing, the better off you're going to get to your destination, which is wellness. It would be a very short paragraph to myself and be a very short paragraph to Kelly. It is okay not to be okay. There's too much perfectionism in this world.
I think it's such an important reminder. I think it's also important to remember that suffering and pain, it's a human emotion and it passes. Gayle, should I ask you the same question?
I feel the same way.
Perfect. What do you do that brings you happiness? Do you have any happiness habits?
We have a wonderful home in the Western North Carolina mountains. We've been outdoor people, very active in climbing, biking, hiking, whitewater. We love to cook and entertain. We do love scholarship winners, friends.
Families we've met through them, their families.
There's no right way to grieve, we've learned. And I don't want to postulate that the way we do it is the way somebody's got to do it. That's exactly the wrong thing. We've been very fortunate that we have had an incredible safety net of family and friends in which to embrace us. And we have engaged with them, and we have been open to meeting as many people as we possibly can in helping. It's the fact that we've been open, that we've allowed people to help us and to help us heal. We've had so many people that have allowed us just and not give advice, because at the end of the day, there really is no advice. There really is no one to go see. I know that sounds very unscientific and non-professional, but once this happens, your best advocacy is in the people that you know and love and will listen to you and let you talk it out, which we continually have to do. Next April, it's going to be 10 years, which if you'd have told me it's 10 years, I would have said you're crazy. I said, there's no way it's 10 years and no way I would have lasted 10 years. But we've lasted 10 years because of the love and compassion of others and the dedication of people like you that are engaging us and keeping us active. That makes a significant difference.
What you said is so important. And that is that when you are feeling a lot of pain or grieving, don't close yourself off to others. Actually do the opposite. Open yourself up to others, because we need each other.
We do. And we need to embrace the life Keller has given us. One thought that I think is significant, and it's very personal. Shortly after his death, and I mean really shortly, when it was in the insane period, which I can only describe as real, definite, bona fide insanity of emotion, we both looked each other and asked the question, which I think we both answered affirmatively. Even if we knew what had just happened had happened, would we know? And if we knew that now, would we choose to have Keller again for 19 years? And both was an absolute stunning affirmative. His life is still alive. I can't touch him and feel him and hug him and kiss him. And I'm not going to meet his wife. I'm not going to see his little boy or his little girl, but I know he is here and I know we will see him again. I believe that this life doesn't begin and end like a match being lit and go out. And his life is living in every time we look at each other, every time we're with a friend, every time we stand in a strange audience, in a strange state, and we'll never see those people again. He is living at that particular moment, and his life has meaning now as it did when he was physically walking this planet. And I'm sorry to have gone on about that.
No, it's so touching.
We'll see him again.
I know you will. He's with you. He's with you. I want to thank you so much. You've helped countless parents listening to this and other students. And your message is one that is so important. A good reminder that it's often the people that look the strongest and have their life looking picture perfect that may be struggling. And so reach out and ask for help. Exactly. Check in. And if there is a little warning sign, listen to your intuition and take it very seriously. You should be proud. Keller's legacy is lighting a path for others, and you're making it shine brighter. Thank you so much for being here today. Continue to love one another. You are such a beautiful example of love. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.